Hi everybody, welcome to my YouTube channel Dr. Srinivas Medical Concepts and my FB page Dr. Srinivas Concepts. This is Dr. Srinivas, neurologist from Andhra Pradesh, India. I am also the medical author of the book Focus Neurology. Today we are going to talk about a very interesting topic, the myasthenia gravis and the core concepts. Myasthenia gravis. Myasthenia gravis is a neuromuscular junction disorder of skeletal muscles of autoimmune nature characterized by weakness and fatigability of skeletal muscles and with improvement with rest. So basically myasthenia gravis is a neuromuscular junction disorder. It is autoimmune nature. It causes easy fatigability and weakness of skeletal muscles, not smooth muscles, and it improves with rest. So these are the characteristics of neuromuscular junction disorder, the myasthenia gravis. So what is the pathophysiology? The pathophysiology of the neuromuscular junction disorder. But before we understand the pathology, let's talk about the normal physiology of the neuromuscular junction disorder. Neuromuscular junction. When there is an action potential coming down in the motor axon, it reaches the terminal part. When the action potential reaches the terminal part, it allows the entry of calcium through the calcium channel, voltage gated calcium channel. The influx of calcium allows the release of the acetylcholine from the conta, which diffuses into the synapse, that is the space between the axon, between one neuron and the other, and it attaches itself to the acetylcholine receptor. The moment the acetylcholine attaches to the acetylcholine receptor, a change takes place which allows the muscle to contract. So basically an action potential runs in the motor axon which allows the influx of calcium, which allows the acetylcholine to diffuse into the synaptic space and allow it to interact with the acetylcholine receptor, which causes the muscle to contract. These are the normal sequence of events which occurs at the neuromuscular junction disorder, neuromuscular junction. So what happens if it is abnormal or pathological? In myasthenia gravis, the acetylcholine receptors get destroyed because of acetylcholine receptor antibodies. So the number of the acetylcholine receptors decrease. Second, there is flattening of the postsynaptic folds. These two are the fundamental defects in myasthenia gravis. One, the acetylcholine receptor number decreases because of the acetylcholine receptor antibody, and second, there is flattening of the postsynaptic folds. So the most important and common antibody in myasthenia gravis is acetylcholine receptor antibody. The other antibodies which can be seen are muscle specific kinase. Second is the low density lipoprotein receptor 4. The low density lipoprotein receptor protein 4 is the other antibody we see. There is a good correlation between the thymus gland and myasthenia gravis. It is speculated that the thymus gland also harbor myeloid cells, muscle cells, which have the acetylcholine receptors, and therefore the body mistakes it to be the neuromuscular junction having the acetylcholine receptors and start secreting antibodies against the acetylcholine receptors, which are seen in the thymus gland, and therefore it not only causes a thymic abnormality but also the neuromuscular junction disorder of the skeletal muscles. So there's a strong correlation between the thymus enlargement the presence of thymus and myasthenia gravis. So these are all the pathophysiologic mechanisms of myasthenia gravis. But what is the clinical presentation? The clinical presentation is that it is very peculiar when it comes to gender. In women, it is commonly seen in younger age group less than 40 years, and in men it is usually seen in older age group more than 40 years. The characteristic features are weakness and fatigability. The weakness and fatigability can be seen in three groups of muscles. One, the ocular muscles. Second, the facial and the bulbar muscles. Third, the proximal muscles. In the ocular muscles, the levator palpebrae superioris gets affected, so they'll have drooping of the eyelid. The third, fourth and sixth nerve and the neuromuscular junctions get affected, so they'll have double vision or diplopia. So when there is ocular movement, the characteristic presentation is double vision and drooping of the eyelid or ptosis. When the facial muscles get affected, they'll have difficulty in chewing for a long time, especially chewing meat, because chewing meat takes a longer time. So initially they are able to chew meat better, but as the time progresses, with the passage of time, they find difficult to chew meat. Bulbar muscles, they'll have difficulty in swallowing, dysphagia, and difficulty in speech. After some time, the speech also slows down. These are about the bulbar and facial muscles. The third group of muscles are the proximal group of muscles, especially the deltoid. So when you ask him to abduct, keep on abducting, after sometimes the person and the patient who is suffering from myasthenia gravis will find it difficult to abduct. So these are the clinical manifestations of weakness of muscles. Since it's a neuromuscular junction disorder of skeletal muscles, the sensory system is normal and the deep tendon reflexes are also normal. We have another two important entities known as ocular myasthenia gravis, and we need to know about myasthenic crisis. Ocular myasthenia gravis is seen in few myasthenic disorders wherein the myasthenia gravis is confined only to ocular muscles despite the passage of time of 3 years. Even with after more than 3 years, if the weakness does not go beyond ocular muscles, we call that as ocular myasthenia gravis. So weakness restricted to ocular extraocular muscles for more than 3 years. Myasthenic crisis. What is myasthenic crisis? When a person suffering from myasthenia may get respiratory muscle weakness, severe respiratory muscle weakness, so much so that he may need ventilator, especially triggered by infections like respiratory tract infections. So this is myasthenia crisis. So myasthenic crisis is a myasthenic gravis patient who needs ventilator for severe respiratory muscle weakness. Sometimes we give immunoglobulins also to combat myasthenic crisis. Right. These are the significant clinical presentation of myasthenic gravis patients. But what are the most important points one has to look for in a person suffering from myasthenia gravis? The most important concepts. One very important concept is that myasthenia gravis is a neuromuscular junction disorder of skeletal muscle, not smooth muscle, and therefore though the person has got eye disorder in the form of ptosis and double vision, the pupil remains normal. The pupil remains unaffected. Because the pupil is a smooth muscle, myasthenia gravis does not affect pupil. So pupillary sparing is one of the important points we need to look for in a person who is suspected to be suffering from myasthenia gravis. So pupil is spared. And then we have to look for 5 Ds. Diplopia, double vision, the drooping of the eyelid, otherwise ptosis. Person may have difficulty in speaking after some time. Dysarthria. Person may have difficulty in swallowing. Dysphagia. Person may have weakness of deltoid after abducting for few minutes. So we have to look for all these 5 Ds in person suffering from myasthenia gravis. So these 5 Ds worsen with activity and improve with rest. So sparing of pupil and weakness in all these 5 groups of muscles which improve with rest and worsens with activity is highly suggestive of myasthenia gravis. But how do we confirm it? How do we diagnose and confirm it? First and foremost is the antibody test. We do acetylcholine receptor antibodies. The simplest and easiest way to confirm myasthenia gravis is to look for acetylcholine receptor antibody, which is present in about 85% of persons suffering from general myasthenia gravis, generalized myasthenia gravis, and 50% of persons who are having ocular myasthenia. Suppose the acetylcholine receptor antibody is absent, about 40% of the patients may have the MuSK antibodies. So if the acetylcholine receptor antibodies are negative, we have to look for the MuSK antibodies. One more important test electrophysiologically we do to confirm myasthenia gravis is repetitive nerve stimulation. It is an electrical representation of clinical fatigability. The clinical fatigability can be confirmed electrophysiologically. It's an electrical equivalent of clinical fatigability. This is repetitive nerve stimulation. So we take a motor nerve and stimulate it and see the contraction of the muscles. Example, abductor pollicis brevis. We stimulate the nerve, the motor nerve, and get an amplitude. We give supramaximal stimulation, and then we give a train of impulses, stimulation at a very low rate, about 2 to 3 hertz, and then we see the compound muscle action potential. Generally the first and second compound muscle actions are good, but with train of stimuli at the rate of 3 per second, it starts decreasing. If there's a 10% decrease, especially the fourth wave compared to the first wave, a more than 10% decrease, a decremental response is suggestive of myasthenia gravis. This is known as a decremental response, which we see in myasthenia gravis. You can see the first wave larger, second wave slightly larger, third wave is decreased, fourth wave is very much decreased. So this is known as decremental response, which we see in myasthenia gravis. This repetitive nerve stimulation can be used for another disease, Lambert-Eaton myasthenic syndrome, which is seen in cancerous conditions like small cell carcinoma of the lung, wherein the pre-synapse gets affected. That is the voltage gated calcium channel antibodies go and affect the calcium channel, so the entry of calcium is affected. It's a presynaptic disorder known as Lambert-Eaton myasthenic syndrome, which we see in neoplastic conditions like bronchogenic carcinoma. Here, the voltage gated calcium channel antibodies go and affect the calcium channel, so the entry of calcium is restricted. Because the influx of calcium does not take place, the acetylcholine is not released, and the interaction of the acetylcholine with the acetylcholine receptor antibody does not occur, and therefore muscle contraction does not occur. It is a presynaptic disorder, very important. It is because of the decrease in calcium. So what happens when we clinically, for example, when the knee jerk is absent, we can repeatedly extend and flex the knee. By giving repeated muscular contractions, we are indirectly stimulating the calcium influx. The calcium entry will be facilitated. When the calcium entry is facilitated, more acetylcholine receptor gets released, and there is an interaction, the muscle starts contracting. Very peculiar and interesting and strange condition. The knee reflex may be absent when we examine the person, but after repeated muscular contraction, the knee jerk is manifest. So with repeated stimuli, there is an incremental response this time. So it's an electrical equivalent of the clinical manifestation of the incremental response, which we see in presynaptic disorder like Lambert-Eaton myasthenic syndrome. So here there is an incremental response. the response, the wave response starts increasing, the amplitude starts increasing. From the first to the second to the third to the fourth, it starts increasing now. But we have to give the train of stimuli at a very fast rate, about 50 hertz per second. So for myasthenia gravis, the repetitive nerve stimulation is a slow stimulation, about 2 to 3 per second. But for myasthenia gravis, it's a fast stimulation, about 50 hertz per second. In myasthenia gravis, we see a decremental response. The wave starts decreasing. In Lambert-Eaton myasthenic syndrome, we see an incremental response. So repetitive nerve stimulation is very, very important, and it is nothing but an electrical equivalent of clinical fatigability. The next very important and sensitive test for myasthenia gravis, in fact one of the most sensitive tests to confirm myasthenia gravis, is single fiber EMG, wherein we do EMG analysis, EMG recording of two muscle fibers belonging to the same motor unit. So we try to analyze the EMG activity of a pair of muscle fibers belonging to the same motor unit. Because of the neuromuscular junction, a delay occurs between the first and the second, but the delay is within the normal limits. This normal delay, we call it as jitter. So what is jitter? Jitter is the variability of interpotential interval of successive discharges of two muscle fibers belonging to the same motor unit. So jitter is an the variability of interpotential interval of two muscle fibers of successive discharges belonging to the same motor unit. Because of the neuromuscular junction, there is a slight delay in the response between the first and second fibers, between the pair of fibers belonging to the same motor unit. But if there is a neuromuscular junction disorder, the delay is more because the transmission gets affected, the delay is more. So the variability in the interpotential interval starts increasing. The normal limits of jitter exceeds. Generally the normal limits of jitter is about less than 34 milliseconds in extensor digitorum communis. But if the interval increases beyond the normal limit, then we suspect myasthenia gravis, a neuromuscular junction disorder. In fact, if there is a severe neuromuscular junction disorder, the variability in the interpotential interval increases so much so that even blocking can occur, wherein one muscle fiber belonging to the same motor unit may not fire also. So jitter, if it is severe, it becomes blocking. So these can be found out on single fiber EMG, where the two muscle fibers of the same motor unit, the EMG is recorded. Next way to diagnose is hydrophonium chloride, which is known as tensilon test, where we give hydrophonium. It is a short-acting acetylcholine esterase inhibitor, and therefore acetylcholine level increases. We give about 10 milligrams, 2 milligrams initially. We see if there is any reaction occurring. If there is no reaction occurring, then we give the next 8 milligrams. But here we have to be careful. We should have always atropine in hand so that we can prevent any complications which may occur. So this is known as tensilon test or hydrophonium chloride. We do not commonly do this test because we have a non-invasive test of confirming myasthenia gravis by detecting acetylcholine receptor antibodies. Only when we are not able to confirm do we go for all these tests. Then ocular myasthenia. Ocular myasthenia, we do CT scan or MRI to rule out other conditions which may affect the ocular muscles. The differential diagnosis of myasthenia gravis includes the congenital myasthenic syndromes, wherein the neuromuscular junction disorder, the structure may get affected because of the genetic reasons. Since it is not an autoimmune disorder, we do not find acetylcholine receptor antibodies. Very important point. In congenital myasthenic syndromes, there is no acetylcholine receptor antibodies because it is not an autoimmune disorder. It is a structural abnormality of neuromuscular junction disorder due to genetics. The second is, as I said, it is the Lambert-Eaton myasthenic syndrome. It's a presynaptic disorder which we see usually in small cell carcinoma of the lung. In fact, it is preceded. Lambert-Eaton myasthenic syndrome is preceded before the actual development of CA lung. And the treatment is 3,4-DAP, diaminopyridine. How does this act? It blocks the exit of the potassium. So potassium remains inside the cell. Since the potassium remains inside the cell, the duration of action potential, that is the depolarization, is prolonged. This is how it acts in Lambert-Eaton myasthenic syndrome. The treatment of myasthenia gravis includes anticholinesterase medication, that is acetylcholine esterase inhibitors like pyridostigmine. Second, which increases acetylcholine. Second is thymectomy. As I said earlier in the discussion, the thymus gland is associated with myasthenia gravis because of the acetylcholine receptors. Third is the immunosuppression. Either we give steroids, or even if steroids it does not get control, we give rituximab. And then finally, especially in myasthenic crisis, we can give IV immunoglobulins. So these are all the basic core concepts of myasthenia gravis, repetitive nerve stimulation and single fiber EMG. I hope you have enjoyed listening to my lecture. If you have any suggestions or comments, kindly post on to my YouTube channel. But please like and subscribe my YouTube channel, Dr. Srinivas Medical Concepts, and my FB page, Dr. Srinivas Concepts. Thank you. Bye.